They say love is a luxury not everyone can afford. I grew up believing I wasn't worthy of that luxury because it had all been bestowed upon Vivienne. I still remember the exact moment I realized I was invisible in my own family. I was 14 years old, standing in the doorway of our Boston townhouse living room, watching my father Arthur Thorne introduce my older sister to his business associates. His voice swelled with pride as he gestured toward Vivienne, resplendent in a cream cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. "This is my golden child," he announced, his chest puffing out. "Vivienne will carry on the Thorne legacy. She's just been accepted into the most prestigious art program in New York." I stood there, invisible, holding a stack of my mother's clean laundry that I'd just finished folding. No one looked my way, not even when I cleared my throat. It wasn't the first time, and it certainly wouldn't be the last, but something about that particular afternoon carved itself into my memory like a scar that never quite healed. My mother Eleanor was no better. She existed in father's shadow, a pale ghost of whatever woman she might have been before marriage consumed her identity. When she looked at Vivienne, her eyes sparkled with vicarious ambition. When she looked at me, if she looked at me at all, there was only a distant sort of acknowledgement, like I was a piece of furniture she'd forgotten to dust. The differences between Vivienne and me weren't subtle. They were painted in bold, cruel strokes across every aspect of our lives. Vivienne had the master bedroom on the 3rd floor, with bay windows overlooking the Charles River. I had the converted storage room in the basement, where the pipes clanked all night and moisture seeped through the walls every spring. Vivienne's closet overflowed with designer clothes, each piece carefully selected during shopping trips to Newbury Street, where father's credit card never seemed to have a limit. I wore hand-me-downs from our cousin's daughter, things that didn't quite fit and smelled faintly of mothballs no matter how many times I washed them. But it wasn't just material things. It was the attention, the consideration, the simple act of being seen. When Vivienne spoke at dinner, everyone stopped to listen. When I tried to share something about my day, I'd be talked over, dismissed, or simply ignored until I learned to stop trying altogether. I became a ghost in my own home, moving through rooms without making a sound, perfecting the art of taking up as little space as possible. I threw myself into my studies because it was the only thing that was entirely mine. While Vivienne attended gallery openings and networked with father's wealthy friends, I spent my evenings at the public library, teaching myself to code on the ancient computers in the technology section. I discovered a world where logic prevailed over favoritism, where problems had solutions if you were smart enough and persistent enough to find them. In that digital realm, I wasn't Aurora Thorne, the forgotten daughter. I was just a mind, solving puzzles, building things that actually worked. The library became my sanctuary. Mrs. Chen, the elderly librarian who worked the evening shift, was the only adult who seemed to notice I existed. She'd saved the computer station by the window for me, the one with the chair that didn't squeak, and sometimes she'd bring me tea in a chipped mug when she saw me hunched over the keyboard at 9 p.m. "Still coding. You have a gift," she told me once, peering at my screen, where lines of HTML and CSS were slowly transforming into a functional website. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I wanted to believe her, but belief is a fragile thing when your own family treats you like an afterthought. The breaking point came during my senior year of high school. I'd spent months working on my college applications in secret, terrified that if my family knew, they'd find some way to sabotage it, or worse, use it as another opportunity to diminish me. When the acceptance letter arrived from MIT's computer science program, I felt something I'd rarely experienced, a surge of pure, unadulterated hope. It was a full ride to the program itself, but I still needed money for housing, books, and living expenses. The letter estimated about $15,000 per year in additional costs. I'd saved almost $3,000 from my part-time job washing dishes at Murphy's Diner on Commonwealth Avenue, but it wasn't nearly enough. I made the mistake of thinking that this achievement, this validation from one of the most prestigious universities in the world, might finally make my parents see me. I chose my moment carefully, waiting until dinner when everyone was together. My hands shook as I placed the acceptance letter on the table between the salt and pepper shakers. "I got into MIT, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Full academic scholarship for tuition." Father glanced at the letter without picking it up. "MIT, for what exactly?" "Computer science, artificial intelligence track." I tried to keep the pride out of my voice, but I could feel it creeping in despite myself. "Only 5% of applicants get accepted." Vivienne laughed, a sharp sound that cut through my moment of hope like a blade. "Computer science? What are you going to do, Aurora? Fix people's laptops for minimum wage?" "How embarrassingly practical." Mother patted Vivienne's hand. "Now, dear, let's not be cruel." But there was no real reproach in her tone. She turned to me with a vague smile. "That's nice, sweetheart. Though I must say, I always thought you'd do something more. Well, something." Father finally picked up the letter, scanning it with the same expression he wore when reviewing disappointing quarterly reports. "It says here you'd still need about $15,000 per year for expenses." He set the letter down, already losing interest. That's not feasible. Vivienne's intensive program at Parsons is costing us $40,000 annually, and she just got invited to study abroad in Milan this summer. That's another $20,000. We simply don't have the resources. The words hung in the air like poison gas. $60,000 for Vivienne's art education, which had produced exactly 3 paintings in 2 years, one of which was literally just a canvas, painted entirely white, that father insisted was minimalist genius. But $15,000 for me to attend one of the best universities in the world? Not feasible. I have $3,000 saved, I said, hating how desperate I sounded. I just need help with the rest. I could get a job, work study, anything. Oh, Aurora, Mother sighed as if I'd suggested something mildly scandalous. You're being so dramatic. Community college is perfectly respectable. You could live at home, save money, and maybe in a few years. In a few years, Vivienne will probably need a car, Father interrupted, already moving on. That Audi she's been wanting. As a graduation present. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that I'd been trying to deny for years. It wasn't just indifference. It was dismissal. I didn't matter. I had never mattered. Plus, Vivienne added, examining her manicured nails, MIT? Really, Aurora? That's so masculine. Don't you want to do something that actually suits you? Something softer? You're already so unfortunately plain. You don't want to make it worse by becoming one of those aggressive tech women. She wrinkled her nose. It's not attractive. Something inside me broke that night. Not with a dramatic snap, but with a quiet, final crack, like ice giving way beneath your feet. I stood up from the table, leaving the acceptance letter where it lay, and walked upstairs to my basement room. I packed a single bag. Everything I truly needed fit inside it with room to spare, and I left. No grand declaration, no slammed doors. I just walked out of the Thorne family home at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in April, and I never went back. I lived in my car for the first month, a beat-up Honda Civic I'd bought for $800 from a guy at the diner who felt sorry for me. I parked in different neighborhoods each night, terrified of getting caught, showering at the YMCA with a day pass I could barely afford. I picked up extra shifts at Murphy's, working doubles until my feet bled into my secondhand sneakers. I slept in 90-minute increments between the breakfast and lunch rushes, my head resting on a rolled-up sweatshirt in the back seat. Mrs. Chen, bless her, let me use the library as my mailing address. When MIT sent their financial aid revision after I explained my situation as a newly independent student with zero family support, she was the one who called me, her voice thick with emotion. Aurora, dear, you need to come see this. The revised aid package covered everything. Housing, meals, books, even a small stipend for living expenses. I sat in the library and cried, actually cried, for the first time in years. Mrs. Chen held my hand and didn't say a word, just let me sob into her cardigan that smelled like lavender and old books. MIT was a revelation. For the first time in my life, I was somewhere that valued what I could do rather than who I was supposed to be. I dove into my studies with the fervor of someone who'd been starving and finally found food. I took extra classes, joined research groups, spent 70-hour weeks in the computer lab building, testing, failing, and building again. My professors noticed me. Not because of my family name or my appearance, but because I was good, really good. By my sophomore year, I was working on machine learning algorithms that caught the attention of tech companies recruiting on campus. By my junior year, I'd filed for my first patent. By senior year, 3 venture capital firms were competing to fund my startup. The idea was elegant in its simplicity, an AI-driven platform that could predict supply chain disruptions weeks before they happened, saving companies millions in logistics costs. I called it prescient, and I poured everything I had into it. I recruited 2 brilliant classmates, Marcus and Gia, who believed in the vision as much as I did. We worked out of a cramped apartment in Somerville, surviving on ramen and the kind of electric excitement that comes from building something genuinely innovative. The first year after graduation was brutal. We nearly went bankrupt twice. I maxed out every credit card I could get, took out loans with interest rates that made my stomach turn, and worked 100-hour weeks without complaint. While my former MIT classmates took cushy jobs at Google and Facebook with 6-figure starting salaries and free gourmet lunches, I was debugging code at 3 a.m. and attending pitch meetings where middle-aged investors barely concealed their skepticism that a 23-year-old woman could possibly understand enterprise software. But prescient worked. It worked brilliantly. Our first major client, a shipping conglomerate, saw their logistics costs drop by 32% in the first quarter. Word spread. We hired our first employees, then our 10th, then our 100th. We moved into a real office in Cambridge, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a coffee machine that didn't spit grounds into your cup. 4 years after founding Prescient, when I was 27 years old, I got the call. A consortium of 3 tech giants wanted to acquire us. The number they proposed made my vision blur. $50 million. My share, as founder and majority stakeholder, would be just over $30 million after taxes and paying out my team. I negotiated them up to $55 million, not because I needed it, but because I could. Because I'd learned that in business, unlike in my family, your value was determined by what you could do, not by some arbitrary designation of worthiness decided before you were old enough to protest. The sale went through on a Tuesday in November, exactly 1 week before Thanksgiving. The timing was almost too perfect, like the universe had developed a sense of narrative irony. I hadn't spoken to my family in 9 years, not a single call, text, or email. They'd made no effort to reach out, which told me everything I needed to know about my importance in their lives. But I'd kept tabs on them, checking their social media occasionally, the way you might check on the weather in a city you used to live in but have no intention of returning to. Vivienne's life, from what I could see, was exactly what I'd expected. She'd graduated from Parsons with middling grades and no real direction. Father had set her up in a gallery space in Soho, which lasted exactly 14 months before closing due to market conditions. Though the real reason was that Vivienne spent more time curating her Instagram aesthetic than actually selling art. She'd moved back to Boston, lived in a loft in the seaport that Father was definitely paying for, and seemed to spend her days attending charity galas and posting photos of designer handbags with captions about living authentically. Father's business, a mid-level investment firm, had seen better days. I'd done some discreet digging and found out he'd made several bad calls during the market downturn, over-leveraged on real estate that crashed, and was now desperately trying to maintain the appearance of wealth while hemorrhaging money. Mother was still Mother, a silent accessory to Father's increasingly frantic attempts to keep up with the Boston elite they'd always aspired to join. When the invitation to Thanksgiving dinner arrived, I almost laughed. It came via my business email, which meant someone had Googled me and found out about Prescient. The message was from Mother, written in that passive-aggressive tone I remembered so well. "Dearest Aurora, it's been far too long since we've seen you. Family is so important, and the holidays are a time for forgiveness and togetherness. Your father and I would be honored if you'd join us for Thanksgiving dinner at the house. Vivienne will be there too, of course. She's doing wonderfully. We'd love to hear what you've been up to. With love, Mother." I stared at that email for 3 days before responding. Part of me wanted to delete it, block the address, and continue living my life as if the Thorns had never existed. But another part of me, the part that still carried that acceptance letter rejection like a stone in my chest, wanted something else. Not reconciliation. Not forgiveness. Acknowledgement. I wanted them to see exactly what they'd thrown away. I accepted the invitation with a brief professional reply. "I'll be there. Aurora." The week before Thanksgiving, I did my homework. I hired a private investigator, which felt excessive but proved worthwhile. The report confirmed what I suspected. Father was drowning in debt, having taken out multiple loans to maintain the lifestyle they couldn't afford. The townhouse had a second mortgage. Vivienne had racked up over $200,000 in credit card debt, shopping addiction barely disguised as investing in her brand. Mother had her own secret. A gambling problem she'd hidden for years, online poker games that had drained over $100,000 from their joint accounts. The Thorne family was broke, masquerading as wealthy, held together by credit and delusion. I also learned something else. Uncle Silas, Father's brother and business partner, had been systematically embezzling from their firm for years. He'd hidden it well, routing money through shell companies and offshore accounts, but I had access to forensic accountants who could trace money through a labyrinth. I put together a file of evidence, not sure yet what I'd do with it, but wanting the option. The day before Thanksgiving, I went shopping. Not for myself, but for the performance I was about to give. I bought a simple but obviously expensive outfit, Armani, understated elegance that whispered wealth rather than screaming it. I got my hair done at a salon where appointments started at $300. I practiced in the mirror, not smiling, not frowning, just that neutral, confident expression I'd perfected in boardrooms. I wasn't going to Thanksgiving dinner as Aurora Thorne, the forgotten daughter. I was going as Aurora Chen, the name I'd legally changed 2 years ago in honor of Mrs. Chen, the woman who'd shown me more maternal kindness in a few library evenings than Eleanor Thorne had in 18 years. I was going as the CEO who'd just sold her company for $55 million. I was going to show them exactly what they'd lost. The townhouse looked exactly the same, that brick facade with the pretentious ivy that Father paid someone to maintain at the perfect level of old money aesthetic. I parked my car, a Tesla Model S, at the curb and sat for a moment, breathing, centering myself. This was just another negotiation. I'd face down venture capitalists and corporate lawyers. I could handle my family. The door opened before I could knock. Mother stood there, and I saw the exact moment she failed to recognize me. Her eyes scanned over me, looking for the awkward, invisible girl she remembered, and found instead a poised woman in tailored clothes with the kind of confidence that money and success create. "Aurora?" she said, uncertainty making her voice rise at the end. "Hello, Mother." I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. The house smelled the same. that mixture of expensive candles and old wood and something indefinably stifling. Thank you for the invitation. She recovered quickly, her social conditioning kicking in. Of course, dear. You look different. Very corporate. It wasn't a compliment. Come in, everyone's in the dining room. The dining room was exactly as I remembered. The long mahogany table that seated 12, the crystal chandelier that father had bragged cost more than most people's cars, the china cabinet full of plates used only for special occasions. Father sat at the head of the table, already well into the wine. Vivienne was to his right, draped in something designer and impractical, her face buried in her phone. Uncle Silas was there too, already red-faced and loud, along with his wife Margaret and their 2 adult sons, neither of whom had ever acknowledged my existence. I took it all in with the detached observation of an anthropologist studying a tribe I'd once belonged to but no longer understood. Aurora! Father stood, and I saw him recalibrate just as Mother had, his eyes widening slightly as he took in the expensive cut of my clothes, the Cartier watch on my wrist, the subtle but unmistakable markers of success. My dear girl, come in, it's been too long. 9 years, I said pleasantly, taking a seat at the opposite end of the table from him. 9 years, 2 months, and 16 days, to be exact. An uncomfortable silence fell. Vivienne finally looked up from her phone, and I saw her do a double take. Aurora? Oh my God, you look so different. Did you get work done? Her eyes scanned my face critically. Your nose looks thinner. No work done, I replied, just aging without the stress of living somewhere I wasn't wanted. Mother made a small noise of protest. Aurora, really, there's no need to be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being accurate. I accepted the wine that Mother nervously poured, expensive Bordeaux that I knew they couldn't afford. But please, don't let me interrupt. I'm sure you were all having a lovely conversation before I arrived. Uncle Silas cleared his throat, that booming laugh he used to cover discomfort. Aurora, young lady, I had no idea you'd become so polished. What have you been up to all these years? Last I heard, you were mucking about with computers or some such. Mucking about, I repeated, tasting the phrase. That's one way to put it. Vivienne leaned forward, her interest piqued now that she'd sized up my appearance and found it threatening. Are you working at one of those tech companies? Like in customer service or something? I have a friend whose sister does that. She says it's soul-crushing, but the benefits are decent. I took a sip of wine, letting the moment stretch. Father was watching me carefully now, his businessman's instinct sensing something but not yet understanding what. I did work in tech, yes. Founded my own company, actually. Oh, how entrepreneurial, Mother said with that particular tone that made encouragement sound like disappointment. One of those little startups. That must be exciting in its own way. It was exciting, I agreed, especially when we closed our Series C funding at a $100 million valuation 3 years ago, though that paled in comparison to last week. The table had gone very quiet. Even Vivienne had set down her phone. Last week, Father said carefully. What happened last week? I set down my wine glass with deliberate precision. Last week, I sold my company, Prescient AI. Perhaps you've heard of it? We've been featured in Forbes, TechCrunch, The Wall Street Journal. We revolutionized supply chain management using predictive algorithms. Uncle Silas laughed uncertainly. Sold it? For what, a nice profit, I hope? I looked directly at him. $55 million. The crash was spectacular. Vivienne had been reaching for her wine glass. It tumbled from her hand, dark red liquid splashing across her white Valentino dress, spreading like blood across silk. She didn't seem to notice, her mouth hanging open in a way that would have been comical if it weren't so pathetic. Father's knife clattered against his plate. The turkey he'd been carving sat half dismembered, knife stuck in the carcass at an awkward angle. His face went through a rapid succession of expressions: shock, disbelief, calculation, and finally a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. 55. Mother's voice trailed off. She was gripping the edge of the table. Million, I finished. US dollars. After taxes and dividing the shares among the founding team, my personal take was just over 30 million. Though with my existing equity and savings, my current net worth is closer to 37 million. Uncle Silas choked on his wine, actually choked, his face turning purple as he coughed and sputtered. His wife had to pound him on the back. But it was Vivienne who broke first. She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping back with a harsh sound. Her hands were shaking, wine dripping from her ruined dress onto the antique rug that Mother had always forbidden us to spill anything on. You're lying, she said, her voice rising. You're fucking lying. There's no way you could never. Never what? I asked quietly. Never be successful? Never be worth something? Never be more than the invisible little sister you all decided I was? Girls, please, Mother tried, her voice weak. No. Vivienne's face was flushed now, ugly with rage and something else. Fear, maybe, or recognition of how badly she'd miscalculated. You're trying to embarrass us. You always wanted to be better than me, to make me look bad. This is just another one of your pathetic attempts to get attention. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and turned it around to show the table. The account balance was clearly visible, $37,482,916.43. I let them stare at it for a long moment before I put the phone away. I didn't want to be better than you, Vivienne, I said, and I was surprised to find I meant it. I wanted to be seen by you. There's a difference, but since being seen wasn't an option, I settled for being successful. Father had recovered his composure, slipping into the smooth businessman persona he wore like armor. Aurora, this is remarkable news, truly remarkable. I always knew you had potential. Your mother and I were so proud of you. The lie was so blatant, so shameless, that I almost admired his audacity. Really, I said flatly. You're proud. You, who told me that MIT was not feasible because you'd already spent my college fund on Vivienne's art degree and her summer trip to Milan. You, who said I should go to community college and be realistic about my prospects. Now, Aurora, he said, that warning tone he used to use when I was supposedly being difficult. That was years ago. People grow. They change. You were so young then. We were just trying to protect you from disappointment. Protect me, I repeated. Is that what you call it? When you gave Vivienne a $60,000 a year education but couldn't spare $15,000 to help me with living expenses at a school I got into on my own merit? When you bought her a new Audi but I was sleeping in my car? Mother gasped. You were sleeping in your car? Aurora, why didn't you tell us? We would have... You would have what? I cut her off. Opened your home to me? The home you still own, where my old room is now Vivienne's walk-in closet? I'd learned that from my investigation. They'd renovated the basement the year after I left. Expanded Vivienne's already excessive wardrobe space. The home where there was never any room for me anyway, not in the physical space or in your hearts? This is ridiculous, Vivienne said, her voice shrill. She'd tried to dab at her dress but had only made the stain worse. You think money makes you better than us? It doesn't. You're still the same pathetic, needy little girl who couldn't understand that some people are just meant to shine, while others are meant to be in the background. That's not cruelty, that's just reality. I stood up, my chair sliding back smoothly. I looked around the table at all of them. Father with his calculating eyes, already trying to figure out how to get his hands on some of my money. Mother with her weak, ineffectual concern that evaporated the moment it became inconvenient. Uncle Silas and his family, parasites who'd never said a kind word to me. And Vivienne, my sister, who'd been given every advantage and squandered it, and who now looked at me with such vicious hatred that it was almost impressive. You're right about one thing, I said to Vivienne. Money doesn't make me better than you. My character makes me better than you. My work ethic makes me better than you. My ability to face rejection and hardship and turn it into something meaningful makes me better than you. The money is just evidence. How dare you, Father said, standing as well. I will not have you insult your sister in my home. Your home? I pulled out my phone again, opened a different app, and showed him the screen. This home? The one that has a second mortgage of $400,000 that you're 3 months behind on? The one the bank is preparing to foreclose on in January? His face went white. How do you... I do my research, I said simply. It's a habit I developed when I had to survive on my own at 18. Unlike some people, I don't just coast on unearned privilege and hope everything works out. Uncle Silas stood up, his face red with anger or wine, or both. Now you listen here, young lady. I don't care how much money you think you have. You don't come into your father's home and disrespect him like this. Family is family, and you owe him respect. I turned to face him fully. Family is family, I echoed. Interesting philosophy coming from you, Uncle Silas. Tell me, does that family loyalty extend to the $3.2 million you've embezzled from Father's firm over the last 6 years? The room exploded. Father turned to Silas with a look of betrayal and fury. Vivienne shrieked something incoherent. Mother actually swayed on her feet like she might faint. But I wasn't done. I have documentation, I continued calmly, pulling a USB drive from my purse and setting it on the table like I was laying down a trump card. Bank transfers, shell company registrations, offshore account numbers, everything the SEC and IRS would need to prosecute. I had my forensic accountants go through your firm's records very thoroughly. Uncle Silas's face had gone from red to gray. You can't. That's illegal. Invasion of privacy. Public business records, I corrected. And a few sources who were very willing to talk once they understood they wouldn't be implicated in your fraud. You weren't as careful as you thought, Uncle. You got sloppy about 2 years ago when you thought you'd gotten away with it. Father grabbed the USB drive, his hands shaking. For a moment, he looked every one of his 63 years, jowly and broken and afraid. Silas, he said, his voice hoarse. Tell me this isn't true. But Silas couldn't. He stood there, opening and closing his mouth like a fish, and that was answer enough. I looked at Vivienne then, really looked at her. The designer dress she'd ruined cost about $6,000. I knew because I'd seen it on the Valentino website when I was doing my research. One of $17,000 worth of purchases she'd made in the last month alone. Money she didn't have, money that was probably on one of Father's credit cards, adding to debt he couldn't pay. And you, I said softly, $214,000 in credit card debt across 9 different cards. Online shopping addiction, masquerading as professional investment. Not a single source of income except Father's dwindling funds. You're 32 years old, Vivienne. When exactly were you planning to become a functional adult? She slapped me. Or tried to. I saw it coming and stepped back. Years of martial arts training I'd picked up for self-defense, making the movement automatic. Her hand whistled through empty air, and she stumbled forward, off balance in her ridiculous heels. I caught her arm, steadying her, and for a moment we were face to face. I could see the desperation in her eyes, the fear, the dawning realization that the sister she'd dismissed and diminished had not only survived but thrived. "Let go of me," she hissed. I did, immediately. "I'm not here to hurt you, Vivienne. Any of you. I'm here to tell you the truth that nobody in this family seems capable of speaking. You're broke. You're drowning. And you've been so busy maintaining the illusion of success that you've forgotten how to actually be successful." I picked up my purse, preparing to leave, but Father's voice stopped me. "Wait." He sank back into his chair, suddenly looking ancient. "If you know all this, if you've known, why? Why come here? Why tell us? Are you going to help us or destroy us?" It was a fair question. I'd asked myself the same thing multiple times over the past week. Standing there in that dining room, surrounded by the wreckage of a family that had never felt like mine, I finally knew the answer. "Neither," I said. "I'm going to do what you never did for me. I'm going to tell you the truth and let you decide what to do with it." I placed a folder on the table next to the USB drive. In here is a debt consolidation plan. If Father sells the firm, downsize the house, and cut expenses to realistic levels, he can avoid bankruptcy. Uncle Silas's theft actually gives you leverage. You can recover some of those funds and use them to stabilize. It won't be comfortable, but you'll survive. I placed a second folder next to the first. This is information for an excellent addiction counselor who specializes in shopping disorders. Vivienne, you need help. Real help. Not another credit card and a fresh start. Therapy, accountability, maybe even rehab. I placed a third folder down. Mother, this is information about Gamblers Anonymous and a forensic accountant who can help you understand where your money went. I know about the online poker. I know about the $130,000 you've lost over the last 4 years. Father doesn't know yet, but he will when he goes through his accounts trying to salvage this mess. You can tell him yourself, or you can let him discover it. The silence was deafening. Mother was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Father stared at the folders like they were venomous snakes. Vivienne had sunk back into her chair, arms wrapped around herself. "I'm not giving you money," I said clearly. "I'm giving you information. What you do with it is your choice. But understand this. I didn't survive by waiting for rescue. I survived by saving myself. That's what you need to do now." Uncle Silas found his voice. "You sanctimonious little bitch. You think you're better than us because you got lucky with some computer program?" "Lucky," I repeated. "Yes. I'm sure the years of sleeping in my car, working 70-hour weeks while going to school full-time, building a company from nothing while you were all living beyond your means and hiding crimes, that was all luck. You're right. I'm incredibly lucky that I didn't turn out like any of you." I walked toward the door, but Vivienne's voice stopped me one last time. "Why do you hate us so much?" I turned back. She actually looked genuine for once, the mask of superiority cracked to reveal something almost human underneath. "I don't hate you," I said, and I realized it was true. Hate requires caring, and I stopped caring about what you thought of me a long time ago. What I feel is pity. You had everything, Vivienne. Every advantage, every opportunity, every bit of love and support that I would have given anything for. And you wasted it. All of you wasted it. You confused wealth with worth, appearance with substance, cruelty with strength, and now you're paying the price for that confusion. I opened the door to leave, but I had one more thing to say. "There's a fourth folder in there," I said quietly. "Information about a scholarship fund I'm starting. It's called the Someday Project. It's for kids who come from families that don't believe in them, who have to fight for every opportunity, who are told they're not good enough or smart enough or worthy enough. Kids like I was. The fund will cover full tuition, housing, and living expenses for college. No strings attached, no expectations of gratitude. Just a chance." I looked at each of them one last time. "I'm going to help hundreds of kids like me, kids you would have dismissed just like you dismissed me. And every single one of them will know that their worth isn't determined by whether their family sees it. I can't save you from yourselves, but I can save others from people like you." I walked out then, leaving the door open behind me. As I got into my car, I could hear shouting from inside the house, accusations and recriminations and the sound of a family imploding. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not sadness, not even relief. Just a calm, settled certainty that I'd done what I came to do. The following weeks were chaotic, though I watched it all from a comfortable distance. Uncle Silas was arrested after father turned over the evidence to the authorities. The local news picked up the story. Boston investment firm executive charged with embezzlement. Father's firm survived, barely, after a fire sale of assets and a humiliating restructuring. They lost the townhouse, moved into a modest apartment in Quincy, the kind of place they would have sneered at years ago. Vivienne's fall was more public and somehow more satisfying, though I took no active part in it. Her creditors came calling, and when she couldn't pay, they sued. Her social media, once full of luxury and excess, went dark for 3 weeks before reappearing with a chastened post about re-evaluating priorities and getting real about life. She got a job? Actual job, at a gallery in Newbury Street. Not as an artist or curator, but in sales, making commission. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was actually good at it, that humility looked better on her than arrogance ever had. Mother's gambling addiction became public knowledge when father, in his financial desperation, had to disclose all household expenses. She entered treatment, a 6-month program in Western Massachusetts. According to the private investigator, I still kept on retainer, not because I cared, but because I liked having information. She was actually engaging with the therapy, actually trying to change. I didn't contact them. They didn't contact me, except for one email from father 3 months after Thanksgiving. It was brief, almost formal. Aurora, I received your folders. We're following the plans you outlined. The firm is stable. Vivienne is working. Eleanor is in treatment. I wanted you to know that we're trying. I also wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Not sorry that you're successful, though I am ashamed that my first thought when you told us was how it could benefit me. I'm sorry that I never saw you. I'm sorry that I measured my daughter's worth by how they reflected on me, rather than who they were as people. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not sure I deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand what I lost. Not your money. You. I lost you. And that's something all the success in the world can't fix. I hope you build a good life, Aurora. I hope you find people who see you the way I should have from the beginning. Arthur. I read that email exactly once, saved it to a folder I never opened again, and moved on with my life. The Someday project launched 6 months after that Thanksgiving dinner. I rented a beautiful event space in downtown Boston, one of those converted warehouses with exposed brick and soaring ceilings. I invited educators, counselors, and social workers who worked with at-risk youth. I invited tech leaders and entrepreneurs who'd started from nothing. I invited Mrs. Chen, who cried when she saw her name listed as the fund's first board member and honorary founder. The event was covered by local news and several national publications. Tech CEO creates $10 million scholarship fund for overlooked students, read the headline in the Boston Globe. The article detailed the fund's mission: to find brilliant kids who were overlooked, underestimated, or actively discouraged by their families and communities, and give them not just financial support but mentorship, therapy if needed, and a network of people who believed in them. I gave a speech that night, standing on a small stage in front of 200 people who'd come to celebrate the launch. I'd practiced it dozens of times, but when I stood there under the lights, looking out at the crowd, the practiced words fled and I spoke from somewhere deeper. When I was 18, I said, I received an acceptance letter to MIT. I was so excited, so proud, so hopeful. I thought that achievement would finally make my family see me, value me, recognize that I was worth their attention. Instead, I was told that my dreams weren't feasible, that my goals weren't practical, that I should settle for less because all the family's resources were already allocated to someone they deemed more worthy. I paused, letting that sink in. I'm not here tonight to talk about my family. I'm here to talk about all the families who do this. Who decide, consciously or unconsciously, that one child matters more than another. Who invest everything in the golden child and leave the others to fend for themselves. Who confuse quietness with lack of ambition, practicality with lack of dreams, difference with deficiency. The room was completely silent. I could see people leaning forward, hanging on every word. The Someday Project exists because I know what it's like to be invisible in your own home. To have your accomplishments dismissed, your potential ignored, your very existence treated as an afterthought. I know what it's like to think that maybe they're right, maybe you aren't good enough, maybe you should just accept the small space they've allocated for you and be grateful for it. I took a breath, steadying myself. But I also know what it's like to discover that they're wrong, that your worth isn't determined by whether your family recognizes it, that you can build a life, a real life, on your own terms. That success isn't about proving yourself to people who never wanted to see you. It's about proving to yourself that you were right to believe in your potential even when no one else did. The applause started then, but I held up a hand. This fund will support 50 students in its first year. Each one will receive full funding for 4 years of college or vocational training, plus housing, living expenses, and mental health support. They'll be paired with mentors who will actually show up for them. They'll join a community of people who understand what it's like to be underestimated and who refuse to let that define their future. I looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as I could. If you know a student who fits this description, please nominate them. If you want to contribute to the fund, we're accepting donations. If you want to volunteer as a mentor, we need you. This project is bigger than me, bigger than my story. It's about creating a world where every kid knows that their potential matters, regardless of whether their family sees it. The applause was thunderous this time. People stood, and as I looked out at the crowd, I saw 3 figures standing at the very back of the room, partially hidden behind a pillar. Arthur, Eleanor, and Vivienne. They weren't supposed to be there. I hadn't invited them, but somehow they'd found out about the event and come anyway. They stood together, not trying to approach or make themselves known, just watching. Arthur's face was haggard, older than I remembered. Eleanor was thin, her expensive clothes replaced with something modest and worn. Vivienne looked different too, her hair in a simple ponytail, her makeup minimal, her designer clothes gone in favor of practical pants and a sweater. Our eyes met across the room. For a long moment, we just looked at each other, and I saw something in their faces I'd never seen before. Not pride, not exactly. Understanding, maybe. Recognition. They saw me now, really saw me, but it was too late for it to matter. I looked away first, turning my attention to Mrs. Chen, who was making her way toward the stage. She hugged me tightly, this tiny woman who'd shown me more maternal love in a library than my own mother had in 18 years. "You did it," she whispered. "You turned your pain into purpose. I'm so proud of you." When I looked back toward the pillar, my family was gone. They'd slipped out as quietly as they'd come, and I felt a strange mix of emotions. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, but something like closure. They'd witnessed my triumph, seen what I'd built from the ashes of their rejection, and they'd had the grace to leave without trying to claim any part of it. That night, after the event ended and the crowd dispersed, I sat alone in my car in the parking garage and finally let myself feel everything I'd been holding back, the grief for the childhood I'd never had. The anger at the years I'd spent believing I wasn't enough. The pride in what I'd accomplished not because of my family but in spite of them. The bittersweet recognition that success hadn't healed the wound. Not entirely, but it had given me the power to ensure others wouldn't suffer the same way. I cried, really cried, for the second time since leaving home. Not tears of sadness but of release, of letting go of the girl I'd been and fully embracing the woman I'd become. The Someday Project became my life's work. In the first year, we funded 50 students. In the second year, 100. By the 5th year, we'd expanded nationally, supporting 500 students annually. I hired a full staff, opened regional offices, and developed partnerships with universities across the country. Every student in the program knew my story, knew that I understood their struggle because I'd lived it. I met with the students regularly, these brilliant, resilient kids who reminded me so much of myself. They came from homes where they were overlooked, dismissed, or actively sabotaged. They'd survived neglect and cruelty, and the particular kind of pain that comes from being invisible to the people who should have loved you most. And they were thriving. Not just surviving but excelling, their potential finally given room to flourish. One girl, Maria, reminded me especially of myself. She was a coding prodigy whose family had mocked her for being too masculine and unmarriageable because of her interests. She'd taught herself to program on library computers, just like I had. When I met her for the first time, she cried and told me that the scholarship had saved her life, that she'd been contemplating suicide because she couldn't see any future for herself. 3 years later, she graduated summa cum laude from Stanford with a degree in computer science. She got a job at SpaceX working on navigation systems. She sent me a photo of her first day, grinning in front of a rocket, with a caption that said, "Thank you for showing me that being invisible to them meant I could be visible to myself." That photo sits on my desk still, a reminder of why I do this work. As for my family, we existed in separate orbits after that night. I received occasional updates through mutual connections, snippets of information that painted a picture of people slowly rebuilding their lives in humbler circumstances. Father eventually closed his firm and took a position as a financial advisor at a larger company, working for someone else for the first time in his career. Eleanor completed her treatment and became a volunteer counselor for other gambling addicts, turning her own struggle into service. Vivienne worked her way up to gallery manager, earned a reputation for discovering new artists, and by all accounts was good at her job. They never asked me for money, not once. Whether that was pride or respect for the boundaries I'd set, I didn't know and didn't particularly care. 5 years after that Thanksgiving dinner, I received an unexpected package. Inside was a letter and a small box. The letter was in Vivienne's handwriting, neat and controlled in a way I didn't remember from our childhood. "Aurora, I've started and deleted this letter probably 100 times over the past 5 years. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for reconciliation. though I hope someday you might be open to it. I'm writing to acknowledge what I did to you, what we all did to you, and to tell you that I understand now why it was wrong. Therapy has been brutal but illuminating. I've had to confront the fact that I built my entire identity on being the chosen one, which meant I needed you to be the rejected one for that identity to work. I participated in your erasure because it validated my existence. That's a horrible thing to realize about yourself. I'm working on it. I have a good job now. I pay my own rent. I'm in a relationship with someone who expects me to be a functional adult rather than a decorative object. I'm learning what it means to have value based on what I contribute rather than what I represent. I found this in Mother's jewelry box when I was helping them move. She told me it was supposed to be yours, a christening gift from grandmother, but it got lost when you left. I think she deliberately withheld it, another way of erasing you. I wanted you to have it, not as payment or apology, but because it's yours, and you deserve to have what belongs to you. I see you now, Aurora. I'm sorry it took me so long. Vivienne. Inside the box was a delicate silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a star. It was beautiful, simple, exactly the kind of thing grandmother would have chosen. I held it for a long time, feeling the weight of it, the history of it, the symbolism of receiving something that should have been mine all along. I didn't respond to the letter immediately. I needed time to process it, to decide what, if anything, I wanted to do with this olive branch. After 3 weeks, I wrote back, a brief note that matched Vivienne's tone, acknowledgement without commitment. Vivienne, thank you for returning the necklace. I'm glad you're building a life you're proud of. That's all any of us can do. We don't get to undo the past, but we do get to decide how we move forward from it. I hope you continue to grow and find fulfillment in your work and relationships. I'm not ready for reconciliation, and I may never be. But I appreciate the honesty of your letter and the effort you've made to change. Take care of yourself. Aurora. It felt like the right balance, honest but not cruel, final but not vindictive. I mailed the letter and put the necklace in my jewelry box, where it sits alongside the few other pieces I own, tangible reminders of a history I've moved beyond but not forgotten. 7 years after I sold Prescient, I started a second company. This one focused on AI ethics and algorithmic transparency. The work was less lucrative but more meaningful, addressing the ways technology can replicate and amplify existing biases. I hired a team of brilliant researchers, many of them someday project alumni, and we published papers, consulted with major tech companies, and testified before Congress about the need for responsible AI development. I bought a house in Cambridge, a modest Victorian with a garden where I grew vegetables and herbs. I adopted 2 rescue dogs, Murphy and Scout, who greeted me with uncomplicated joy every time I came home. I dated occasionally, nothing serious, still figuring out how to trust people with the vulnerable parts of myself that my family had taught me to hide. I had friends now, real friends, people who knew my whole story and valued me anyway. Marcus and Ja, my co-founders from Prescient, remained close. We had dinner once a month, trading stories about our new ventures and laughing about the early days when we'd survived on ramen and ambition. Mrs. Chen came to visit every few months, and we'd spend afternoons in my garden, drinking tea and talking about everything and nothing. I was happy. Not in a triumphant, vindictive way, but in a quiet, genuine way. I'd built a life that mattered, work that made a difference, relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or blood. I'd proven to myself that my worth wasn't contingent on my family's recognition. I existed fully, visibly, powerfully, in a space I'd created for myself. On the 10-year anniversary of selling Prescient, I received an invitation to speak at MIT's graduation ceremony. Standing on that stage, looking out at thousands of graduates in their caps and gowns, I thought about the girl I'd been when I received my own acceptance letter. Hopeful and naive, still believing that achievement could earn love, that success could fill the void left by rejection. 10 years ago. I told the graduates, I stood where you're standing now. I had a degree, a dream, and absolutely no safety net. My family had made it clear they didn't believe in me, didn't think I was worth investing in. I could have let that define me. I could have internalized their assessment and settled for less than I was capable of. Instead, I made a different choice. I paused, making eye contact with students scattered throughout the crowd. I chose to define my own worth. Not based on whether my family saw my potential, not based on whether I fit their expectations or fulfilled their vision for my life, but based on what I knew I was capable of. It was terrifying. It was lonely. There were nights when I wasn't sure I'd make it, when the weight of being completely on my own felt like too much to bear. But I kept going because I understood something fundamental. Other people's inability to see your value doesn't diminish that value. It just means they're looking at the wrong things. The crowd was silent, attentive. I could see some students nodding, recognizing themselves in the story. Some of you are sitting here with families who are so proud they could burst. Treasure that. Some of you are sitting here with families who don't understand your choices, who wanted you to pursue different paths, who love you but struggle to see you clearly. Be patient with them. And some of you are sitting here alone, with families who didn't come, who didn't support you, who maybe actively tried to prevent you from being here. This is for you. I gripped the podium, leaning forward. Your worth is not contingent on their recognition. Your potential is not limited by their lack of vision. Your future is not constrained by their inability to imagine it. You are here because you earned it. You belong here because you proved you belong here. And whatever you build from this moment forward is yours, entirely yours, not diminished by their doubt or validated by their approval. The applause started then, building to a roar. I saw some students crying, others standing, and I felt that same sense of purpose that had driven me to create the Someday Project. This was why I told my story, not for revenge or vindication, but to give others permission to define themselves outside of family narratives that didn't serve them. After the ceremony, a young woman approached me, her graduation cap askew, her face streaked with tears. "Miss Chen?" she said, using the name I'd claimed. "I just wanted to thank you. My parents didn't come today. They said college was a waste of time for a girl, that I should have gotten married instead. I've spent 4 years wondering if they were right, if I made a mistake. But hearing your speech, I think maybe they were just wrong." I took her hands in mine. "They were wrong," I said firmly. "And someday, when you've built the life you want, you'll know without question that they were wrong. But you don't need them to acknowledge it. You just need to live it." She hugged me then, this stranger who felt like a kindred spirit, and I hugged her back, thinking about how far I'd come from the girl who'd believed her worth was determined by whether her family saw her. Later that evening, sitting in my garden with Murphy's head in my lap and Scout chasing fireflies, I received a text from an unknown number. "Aurora, this is Arthur. I watched your MIT speech online. You were magnificent. I wanted you to know that I understand now what I lost. Not your money or your success, but you. The daughter who was always there, who I never bothered to see. I don't expect you to respond. I just needed to say it. I'm sorry." I read the text 3 times, feeling complicated emotions I didn't have names for, sadness for what could have been, anger that it had taken 10 years and a public speech for him to understand, relief that I didn't need his understanding anymore, pity for the relationships he'd destroyed through his blindness. I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to say. He'd apologized, acknowledged his failures, and that was enough. I didn't owe him forgiveness or reconciliation. I didn't owe him anything at all. Instead, I texted Mrs. Chen. "Thank you for seeing me when my family couldn't. Thank you for being the mother I needed when I had nowhere else to turn. I love you." Her response came immediately, punctuated with heart emojis. "I love you too, dear girl. I always knew you were special. I'm so glad you finally see it too." That night, I stood in my bathroom and put on grandmother's necklace, the star pendant resting against my collarbone. I looked at myself in the mirror, really looked, not with the critical eye of someone searching for flaws or the defensive eye of someone expecting judgment, but with the clear eye of someone who finally knew her own worth. I saw a successful entrepreneur who'd built 2 companies from nothing. I saw a philanthropist who'd changed hundreds of lives through the Someday Project. I saw a woman who'd survived rejection and neglect and emerged stronger for it. I saw someone who'd learned that love isn't something you earn through achievement or perfect behavior, but something you deserve simply by existing. Most importantly, I saw someone who was no longer invisible, not because my family finally saw me, but because I'd learned to see myself. The star pendant caught the light, glinting silver against my skin. I smiled at my reflection, a real smile, full of hard-won contentment and pride. The invisible daughter had become visible, not through their recognition, but through her own power, and that made all the difference. Years would pass, and my relationship with my family would remain distant but civil. We'd exchange holiday cards with brief, polite messages. I'd hear through mutual acquaintances that they spoke of me with something like pride, though always tinged with regret. Vivienne would eventually marry, have children, and by all accounts become a devoted mother who made sure both her daughters felt equally loved and valued. Eleanor would dedicate her retirement to addiction counseling, helping others avoid the mistakes she'd made. Arthur would write occasional letters, always brief, never expecting responses, just sharing updates about his life and expressing pride in my accomplishments, a decade too late but genuine nonetheless. I'd build new relationships, found families and friendships and professional partnerships. The Someday Project would grow exponentially, helping thousands of students who'd been overlooked and underestimated. I'd mentor hundreds of young professionals, particularly women in tech, showing them that success wasn't about conforming to others' expectations, but about defining your own metrics of achievement. On the 20th anniversary of that Thanksgiving dinner when I'd announced my success, I'd host a reunion for Someday Project alumni. Hundreds would attend, these brilliant people who'd gone on to become doctors, engineers, artists, teachers, entrepreneurs, activists, all of them united by the experience of being invisible until they'd made themselves impossible to ignore. Standing on the stage that evening, looking out at the crowd of people I'd helped, I'd finally understand what revenge really meant. It wasn't about making your enemies suffer. It wasn't about forcing them to acknowledge their mistakes or beg for forgiveness. Real revenge was building something so meaningful, so impactful, so undeniably valuable that their rejection became irrelevant. It was turning their no into fuel for your yes. It was proving that their inability to see your worth said everything about them and nothing about you. I'd succeeded beyond my wildest dreams, not because I'd shown my family what they'd missed, though I had, but because I'd shown myself what I was capable of when I stopped waiting for permission to be remarkable. The invisible daughter had become a woman who shaped the world. And in the end, that was the only validation that mattered.